Advanced stuff, globalizing a function or a script. Now, much of the scripting that you do in PowerShell is probably going to be for you and your very near and dear friends and colleagues. So you're not going to worry so much about making sure that they're compatible with other languages and cultures. But in certain organizations, you may find that some of your colleagues exist in different countries where it's not usual for them to speak English, and you may want to provide versions of your code that speaks their language and speaks their culture. Well, PowerShell globalization makes that pretty straightforward. You write your code once, and you separate the culture bits, you separate the language bits, so that those can be translated independently. One set of code gains the ability to speak many different languages. So let's start by quickly defining the words globalizing and localizing. Globalizing is the act of writing program code that is capable of adapting itself to different cultures or languages. Localizing is the act of taking that globalized code and actually creating translations for other cultures or languages. And in PowerShell, you do that by using data sections in your scripts, your functions, or modules, and supporting those with PSD1 data files that contain the translations into different cultures and languages. So again, the overall idea here is to take out any of your hard-coded text strings and replace them with little placeholders. You then can define versions of that text in different cultures. Now, I should take a minute to explain culture, because I kind of started this off with the word language. Language means words. In the Microsoft universe, a culture includes not only language, but it can include some subtle takes on language. For example, the Brits spell the word color differently than the Americans do. We can both figure it out when we're reading it, but it is a different culture thing. Culture can also include colors, symbols like icons. It can include a lot of things, all the different things we use to communicate and represent information. Now, because PowerShell is text-based, most of what we're going to be working with is still language. So what I've done here is I've gone into my OS Tools module and I've made some modifications to support globalization. Now, if you're watching this nugget and you're German, I apologize. I don't actually know German, so I have to fake this out a little bit. Look what I've done at the very top of my module. I've added what's called a data section, and I've stored that in the variable messages. At the very top of this, I have to put this comment because this is telling PowerShell what culture my default languages are for. So DE is German. And in that section, I'm converting from string data, and this is just a series of let's call them tokens or placeholders. So anytime I use the placeholder connecting, I want it to say gonna talk to, and anytime I use failed, it's gonna say that did not work. Okay, this is my default. So if I run my script on a computer and the Windows operating system is set for the DE-DE culture, then it will use these text strings, right? All right, let's skip ahead a bit and see where those are used. Line 20 is one instance. Instead of printing the words I am now connecting to or gonna talk to right in this string, I'm using a sub-expression that grabs my messages variable, that's this guy right here, and it grabs the connecting token, that's this guy right here. So convert from string data is actually turning these into a hash table, because that's what this is. Each of my tokens becomes a property of this variable. So messages.connecting will produce gonna talk to. Now I did this a little bit later too. If there's an error in my catch block, it'll write a warning with messages.failed, which on a German machine would print that did not work. So that's my default. Now, typically what you're going to do is whatever language you are thinking in as you write your script, that's going to be what you stick in here as the default. The reason I put German in here as the default is because I don't have access to a German system. So I wanted to show you what PowerShell would do when this default language isn't the one that Windows operating system is using. So this is a little easier to see in Explorer here. Let's drill into where this module is stored. Okay. So I've got my modules folder. Here's my OS Tools folder. This contains the module, and as you can see here, I've got my OS Tools.pm1 script module. That's what we've been looking at over here in the ISE. I've created a folder called en-us, and that's what you do. For each additional language you plan to provide, above and beyond the one that's in your script, for each additional language, culture, you create a folder. en.us is US English. en.uk would be, maybe it's en.gb for Great Britain. I forget their culture code, but anyway, it's the culture codes. For example, I have another one in my head. It's nope, I lost it. I thought I knew the Arabic one, but I don't. Anyway, enus. In there, you put a file that's named the same thing as your script. So my script is called ostools.psm1. So this is called ostools.psd1, D for data. This is what that looks like. It's just a comment indicating what culture this is for, and then a convert from string data section, and it provides the same tokens, connecting and failed, along with the English translations for those. Okay? So here's what happens. I'm going to run this script. Let's make this window a little smaller so you can still see my language strings there. I'll run that function, that command, get sys disk details. Oh, I missed one important point. After my default data section, which contains my default strings, which is going to be in this language, I run the import localized data and give it the name, which does not include the $, the name of my variable that contains all the strings. What this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, hey, Windows operating system, what culture are we running on right now? Windows says, why, we're an en-us system. Awesome. I'm going to go into the en-us folder, and I'm going to load this, and I'm going to use this to replace these. I'm going to overwrite them in the messages variable. That's how it's making the connection between all those things. Now, what does it do if it finds itself running on a computer where you have not created a translation? In other words, it goes, hey, we're running on a JP-JP, Japanese system. So I'm going to go look for a JP-JP. I don't see one. Well, then they're going to get this. This is the default. This will load in any that you have provided in an attempt to match it to the local computer. Now, there actually is a failback mechanism it can use too. You can provide just a plain en, and that would be a fallback for en-anybody. Like en-au, I believe, is Australian English. en-us is US. So you can provide sort of a top-level fallback for the broad language. Anyway, let's see it work now. So I'm going to run my command. I need to provide it with a computer name parameter. And because those messages were verbose messages, I need to make sure that I'm displaying verbose messages. Let's also make sure we see the warning message. Let's see what all this does. Connecting to localhost, connecting to not online. Just hum the Jeopardy song in your head right now. Go ahead. Got a timeout. Gotta check all the DNS. There it goes. Whoops, scrolled by really fast. Could not connect to not online. So up here, let's get all these on the screen at once. You'll see that it's using the English versions because it found itself running on an en-us system, and so it loaded the en-us alternative strings. So this is how you globalize or localize a script. You provide a set of default language items in a variable, then you import localized data. It knows to look in a subfolder. So this is not super magical here. This is why you got to be a little careful. If this is where your script is located, then this is where your language subfolders have to be located. Your language subfolders need to contain one file with the same file name as your script and the PSD1 file name extension. And they need to look like this. So the purpose of this, and the reason Microsoft broke it out that way, is kind of cool. Let's say you speak English. So you provide all of your strings for your entire script in English, and you would put culture en-us or whatever, but you convert to string data and you list all your tokens here. You can then hand that to a translator. You can hand just this section to a translator and say, look, I need you to make PSD1 files in the following cultures. We have to support German, we have to support Japanese, we have to support Russian, and we're going to support Australian US. The translator doesn't have to touch your code. They don't have to let their grubby little fingers into your actual functional code at all, because all you've used in your code is this placeholder text. They can simply create and modify these files, which are basically just text files. You can provide them with the English one as a starting point. Tell them, just translate everything on the right side of the equal signs and give it back to me. And then you've separated those two tasks now, so they don't have to get into your code, but they can still help you get a translated version of your script. It's actually a pretty cool kind of structure that Microsoft has set up if you think about it. So now you know the difference between globalizing, which is writing a script that is designed to support language translation, and localizing, which is the process of providing culture translations for different cultures. And PowerShell does that by using data sections and PSD1 data files. So you can provide a data section in your script for your default language, and you can provide data files for alternate languages. Now in my example, I provided a data file for the entire module, and that's because I expect it to use some strings, like now connecting to such and such a computer, in many of my functions. It's also completely legitimate to provide a data section inside each function. I just felt that because my messages were kind of ones I was reusing a lot, I would have less copying and pasting if I included them as an attribute of the module rather than having to copy and paste them into each function. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.